Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So parenting in a time of the internet and unprecedented access to every vice and sin is affecting every single parent I know. It's literally like having a Quran on a bookshelf next to a pornographic magazine, next to a book on atheism, next to a book inviting kids to question their sexuality, etc. There are no more quote unquote restricted sections in public life anymore. Are there any writings or Islamic guidance on the rights of teenagers to privacy? In this day and age, when they are on social media and so often not using their judgment wisely about messages and photos, to what extent can parents interfere from an Islamic perspective, which is conscious of psychological understandings of adolescence? I say this because I recall a halakha where the professor referred to a hadith about snooping. If a man comes home from a trip, he shouldn't linger at the door to entrap or catch his family and act with suspicion. I understood the ethics behind this to be relationships should be built on trust and not actively searching for the sins of your family. But what about parents who know their teenager is in trouble online and knows this because they've seen something behind their backs? I have 3 friends, myself included, who are all in the same situation, trying to navigate the parent-teacher boundaries in an Islamic way and not fall into authoritarian kinds of parenting styles. I know this is a very big topic. Perhaps I can drill it down to a single question. I have found something on my very young teenager's messages to her friends that disturbs and upsets me. To confront her is to reveal that I read her messages. I read them because there were warning signs that something was very wrong and my gut instinct was correct. Islamically, is this snooping or being unjustly suspicious, or do I have a right to act and breach her privacy? Thank you so much.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, the issue of privacy in Islam first. Um, Privacy was always addressed in Islamic sources in 2 distinct contexts. Uh, the first is in the context of adults dealing with each other. The second is in the context of the government dealing with its citizens. Um, so, in other words, government spying on citizens. When we when we talk about adults dealing with each other, the first context, the logic about the logic that spying is unacceptable is motivated by a desire to uh, um, disencourage those who like to perpetuate scandals. In other words, the social tendency to become addicted to scandal making and to live in scandals and to turn scandals into reputation, into entertainment, because it is very possible that socially people would entertain themselves the by the ill repute they attribute to others, and that becomes a source of entertainment. So to put it bluntly, that it becomes a source of entertainment to talk about other people and what other people have done, and to uh, and when people fall into this social habit, they tend to exaggerate scandals and add to them to make them more entertaining um, um, and more interesting and more engaging, and to add juice to the story. And ultimately, what that ends up doing is that it breeds distrust in society, and it is a social habit that is through and through un-Islamic and evil. So the entire logic is that when adults deal with each other, there should be an expectation of privacy. They should try to build relationships on the basis of trust, and that rather than scandalize each other, or that rather than embarrass each other or want to embarrass each other, they should do exactly the opposite. That they, if they know something, if they see something or hear something that is scandalous about another person, when it comes to private dealings, the presumption is that unless a crime has been committed and you need to expose something because a crime has committed, is that you actually cover for the other person. You actually not speak about it and not dwell upon embarrassing topics. And the Quran, uh, uh, you know, it even draws an analogy that talking about others in a in an in talking about others in order to demean them or to degrade them or to embarrass them is like eating their flesh. And the Quran makes it clear that this is like cannibalism, that you're as if cannibalizing your brother or your sister. So that is understood. Now the second context is that the government has an enormous amount of power, and when the government uses that power to spy on people, the government often uses the color of legality or the cover of legality uh, to abuse its power. If you deny people the right to privacy, then you end up with a government that is autocratic, authoritarian, and absolute, because the government can use its power to reach into the lives of people. And and although the government might do this under the guise of fighting crime, what ends up happening is that the government ends up abusing this power to disrupt the lives of people and to make people beholden to it, so that people lose any sense of autonomy and any sense of freedom and any sense of individuality and any possibility of growth and development. These are the two distinct contexts in which we have Islamic sources speaking about privacy. Uh, there is, because of course of the historical circumstance under which Sharia discourses developed and Sharia law developed, there wasn't much at all, and there isn't much about the privacy of minors being raised by their parents. Um, what what we do have a great deal on is the type of respect that children owe their parents. And one very important element here, and I think that's the element that can help us a lot, is that there is a great deal of emphasis on honesty and truth. That in order to honor your parent, you owe your parent honesty and truth. That lying to your parent is especially a grievance sin. That you shouldn't lie, you shouldn't hide, you shouldn't conceal, you shouldn't conspire. That your parent cannot look after your best interest if you disrupt this process and derail this process by being fraudulent with your parent. And that fraud in dealing with your parent is if a form of dishonoring your parent. So if we take this and try to apply it to our modern age, um, social media has presented us with a reality that is very different, that is truly unprecedented. The closest thing we come to is, for instance, if you know that, and we do have precedents on this point. If you have a child and you know that a certain sector of town, a certain neighborhood in town, has bars and prostitutes and people of ill repute, and you tell your child, don't ever go into this section of town, and then you hear from friends or from whoever that your child in fact did go to that neighborhood, is that a right of privacy that your child has? Or do you have the right to confront your child about disobeying your orders and going into a neighborhood of disrepute? And the answer that we get is very clear. You have a right to confront your child because your child disobeyed. Your child violated your trust when they did what they were not supposed to do. So this gives us guidance on the issue of social media. When you trust your child with a phone, with access to computers and access to social media, it has to be very clear. You have to raise your child. I am providing you these privileges, but these privileges come with responsibilities. And the responsibilities are the following. I mean, you have to be very clear that it means you don't visit certain types of sites, you don't engage in certain types of discourse. If you have minors, for instance, you have to warn them and teach them about um, 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 predators on the web, because your child is in constant danger of predators. You have to teach them about the dangers of people who profit of the exploding sexual desire that is in adolescence. You have to teach them about the danger of companies that profit from a culture of likes and number of views and encourage children to do things like pose half naked or in inappropriate postures just so they can make money. And so when you are giving your child these abilities, you're not giving them these abilities without conditions and rules. And that has to be very clear. This is a relationship of trust. The relationship of trust is, here are the rules, and all of that is premised on honesty and transparency. You don't hide something from me, because if you hide, if you conceal, then that's a violation of the terms of our trust. And therefore, up to the point a child becomes an adult, including the adolescent years, there isn't an expectation of privacy. There is an expectation of transparency and honesty. That's the expectation, not of privacy. The with adults, when I enter a relationship with an adult, part of what we negotiate is that I have my private life, you have your private life. And that's because you have no authority over me as an adult, and I don't have an authority over you as an adult. Neither of us can claim that we know better than the other. But this is not the case with your child. Your child, you are providing the means of empowerment, and the whole presumption is that you are a parent because you know better. You have more experience. Now, I understand that I understand from my wife that there is a way that you can actually set up things that whatever messages your child gets, you get at the same time. So you can actually read. And this is what we have with our teenage son, is that any message he sends out or any message he receives, we get the same message. So we can see all his messages. And from the time that we bought him the equipment, that was the understanding. You are not entitled to send messages that we don't see or receive messages that we don't see. And also, you are not entitled to be in your room and close the door to communicate with your friends secretly, because our role as parents is to protect you. And we can't do our role, we can't perform that role unless we have absolute access to you. And so you have to raise them with these understandings, so none of them are surprising and none of them are jarring to them. That none of them come and say, well, I didn't, this is not what I understood is going to happen. It's from the very beginning, it has to be understood that no, there are limits, because our primary function, until you are old enough to be an independent adult, is our primary function is to protect you in a dangerous world, and we can't do that unless we have full information. Now, but there is a very critical element to this. It is critical that, especially with your children, that you demonstrate the rules you want to impose. So, what helps a great deal is that, in the same way that you expect your child to have complete transparency, is that you show complete transparency to your child. Your child wants to know that you live the principles that you teach. The worst thing that befalls a child is to see their parent as a hypocrite. So, and I'll be very blunt, if you tell your child, don't visit pornographic sites, you don't visit pornographic sites. And it is important that the way that you set the social media in your home is so that you show your child you have nothing to hide, in the same way that your child should have nothing to hide. These are the rules within the family. We have nothing to hide from each other. When you have parents that have secret relationships, and so they're hiding their relationship with, or they have secret communications, that's when children start getting very confused. Well, why are you keeping secrets but I can't keep secrets? This is very, and having a family conversation about why transparency is very important for the health of the family, um, in the age of social media, is very important, because you are basically making agreement as a family that there are many dangers out there in the world, and the way that we can protect one another from these dangers is to be honest with each other and to be transparent with each other. And that in order to help one another remain on the straight path, we don't want shaitan to come and hide in dark corners. And so what we're going to do is that we're going to chase away dark corners. We're going to clean up the dark corners in our family and your child understands that shaitan dwells and grows in dark corners, and that so you want to create a family that doesn't have dark corners. um Now, in a situation like this where you've spotted something, I mean, of course, here it's where it gets very tricky. And um, I mean, I think you do owe it to your child that if you see clear signs of your child going down a dangerous path, to sit with them and to explain to them basically the conversation we've had. If you haven't had this conversation yet, it's at least late, better late than never. Um, and to say, you know, we need honesty, otherwise, we're not going to be able to protect each other. We need transparency in the family. We need to be able, trust is not an entitlement that you're born with. Trust is something that you earn from a record of good judgment. And, when adults deal with each other, you have a choice who you can trust or you don't, because you have a choice who you create a relationship with or not. But in a family, you don't have that choice. So you can't just say, well, everyone is entitled to a presumption of trust, because you can't choose who you deal with. And so it, when it to have that conversation and to diplomatically um, bring it to the attention of your adolescent child, here is why I'm concerned. And yes, I might have, it is my obligation, it is my job to make sure you're safe. And if you're not safe and something happens to you, uh, morally, ethically, if you were negligent in your role as a parent, you're responsible. And you can't bear that responsibility. If you should have acted to protect your child and you fail to do so, well, that's on you. And you take it from there. I don't think that just ignoring it and saying, well, I respect your right to privacy is a solution, because the dangers to our children are so monumental. And a lot of children and a lot of adolescents and a lot of teenagers go through extremely painful experiences, and experiences that sometimes lead to suicide, to addiction, to running away from home. One of the things I remember, I was driving with some friends on a long distance trip, and we stopped on a rest stop on the way, and there were flyers posted of missing children. And I was looking at the flyers, and this is in California, and I couldn't fail to notice that a couple of the people on the flyers were Muslim children. Children with Muslim names. And it was surreal, because just because we're Muslim, it doesn't mean we are immune to the types of things that happen to children in the society. And you can't act as an authoritarian Middle Eastern parent, barking out commands, because that's not going to work. But you can't put your head in the sand either. And you have to drill into your child that as a family, we either sink together or we swim together. And that as a family, we protect each other. And in the same way that I need to be honest with you as my daughter or as my son, when I see a problem, I grant you the same privilege. If you have a problem with me as a parent, I'm going to open my heart and my mind for you to come and criticize me and tell me what is it that you don't like or what is it that you have a problem with. And that's how we build the family. That's how we create trust and honesty in the family. Um, I don't think you can ignore it because as I've said before, one of my fields is human trafficking, and I can tell you that in the United States, people think that the children who gets trafficked in the United States are foreigners, are aliens, or undocumented aliens. No, actually, the reality is 90% of the children that get trafficked in the United States are children from suburbs and from urban centers, but a very high percentage are also from suburbs. And that a very high percentage, I don't remember what percentage, of those who get trafficked, the process of trafficking begins with social media. That's how the initial hook is made. And you obviously don't want to end up um, with a devastating experience like that. And it happens all around us, all the time, to so many families. And we just don't hear about it because it happens all the time. So it actually doesn't raise an eyebrow anymore. Um, any other questions? Is that clear enough? Okay, alhamdulillah.